Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. Today we're continuing our discussion on AD&D, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. I was talking about GMing and players and the combination between the two of them. I'm going to continue that, and I'm going to, of course, continue with races. Now, I will continue with a little bit more of the race level cap, which I talked about last time. There is one more optional system I do want to mention, high ability scores. Now, if your race requires an ability score to play it, if you have an exceptionally high ability score, there's an optional rule that says that will allow you to break your level cap by a certain number of levels, depending on your ability score. The higher the ability score, the more extra levels you can have in that class to whatever maximum would be appropriate in. So effectively, it can go from 1 to 4 more levels by having this level cap this way. Effectively, I'm so good with my natural abilities based upon that class that I can be better at gaining a class in that. Really, that's what it is. I'm really great at it. Now, they also talk about making up your own races from the monsters or other creatures that you could bring in to have players use, and they talk about what would be appropriate for this. Of course, you want a race, if you want a character to either choose a race that you would invent yourself or invent something to add into your world, make it appropriate to the campaign. You don't want to bring in that people would be playing ogres if it wouldn't make sense for ogres to be player characters in this case. Now, there are certain rules you want to follow when having this, when making new playable races. The first thing is they have to be humanoid. You want them to be humanoid because it's easier to fit in with the groups. You want them to have no special abilities. You want them to be very mundane in their abilities. Nothing supernatural or massively magical. You don't want them being extra dimensional. You want them to be from the material plane. You want them to be the normal side of creatures, stick with them, and you want them to be cooperative. You want it to be a race that can get along with humans, that can get along with other races. If they're not cooperative, you're going to have problems, and it's not going to be that much of a good time. Now, they do list a number of races that they can suggest are very easily adaptable in these circumstances that fit all these criteria. You can see their list is very short, but you can look at it. And of course, there are other races that you could bring in if you think it would fit under these criteria. Now, let's talk about adapting these races for your games. Now, they do talk about ability scores and your races, that depending on the different ability scores, you might get penalties for that. The basic intelligence in the monster manual will give you an idea of maybe of bonuses or penalties to your intelligence based upon that, and your ability scores will affect that. Larger creatures also get more physical bonuses than smaller creatures, which get physical penalties. Things like that. Also, the ability score requirements to play the race are effective around these things. If your race doesn't have a lot of intelligence, it's not going to require a lot of intelligence to play it. On the other hand, if it's got a lot of strength, you should have a pretty decent strength in order to play that race. This also deals along with the level cap similarly. If it has a very high need for an ability score, that it seems natural to have that high of an ability score, then the higher the cap would be for a class you would have at that race. So you look at those and you can figure out what it would be. And of course, you then are looking at what classes are appropriate for these races. If a class does not have a lot of intelligence, it shouldn't be appropriate to have it be a wizard. It shouldn't be able to learn about it. While on the other hand, if it has a massive amount of it, then yeah, wizard's a fine option for that race. And you look at what ability scores mean for what options you would have for being a class. Now, there are some basic statistical changes to a race you have to know about. The first thing is, of course, hit dice. Your hit dice are going to be based around, of course, your class. It's always the same as number. But races get bonus hit points for one being an unusual race, dependent on first your size, and then second, how many hit dice you had as a monster. For example, you would get bonus hit points per hit dice dependent on what kind of racial hit dice your monster race would have had. Now, your monster race, of course, will have AC changes. Some of them have natural AC. Now, natural AC, you use the barding rules that horses have to determine how armor affects them. So you're using the barding rules when arming a creature with natural AC. Now, their base movement is going to be the same as in their monster manual. The number of attacks is, again, same as in monster manual. The level progression is just going to be the basic level progression until you reach the maximum level like I talked about. Now, there are some disadvantages to being a larger creature, or you have to worry about building sizes and vehicle sizes and mounts. You can't ride on a horse if you're large. You can't fit into much buildings. You have to worry about breaking furniture. So there are major disadvantages for being a larger character that your character may have to face if he chooses to be so. And you also have to worry about NPC reactions. Just because you're one of these races and just because it could cooperate doesn't mean people won't be prejudiced or hate you. People recognize elves, dwarves, and halflings. They know about these. They can see them and be like, oh, that's an elf. You know, I know about elves. Maybe they haven't seen one in their lives, but they probably have heard of them. If you're playing something unusual, even if it theoretically would be cooperative with human races, doesn't mean people will really like you. Now let's move on and talk about classes in your players. Classes in your players, I do have to first go over the NPCs and classes. Players have classes because they're very much so exceptions to the rules, and you do get NPCs which do get classes. But the majority of NPCs, the majority of people in the world, are level 0 classless people that are just normal people. They have a name and occupation and a bit of personality, but they themselves are level 0. They cannot gain experience, they cannot level, they are just normal people. They're like a maid or a sailor, or even there can be like a guard will be level 0. A guard that has levels in fighter is rarer than a guard that has just a level 0 guard. Now next time I'm going to dive more into the rules of creating your level at 0 NPCs and what that would mean in case your characters would get into a fight with them. So if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. Show support for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.